Hello and welcome. I'm Anna Wild of The Birth Whisperer, where you discover the courage, calmness and confidence that you need for giving birth. It makes sense that good posture in pregnancy can support your own physical health, but how can you tell if you have good posture? And how can your posture in pregnancy affect the position of your baby in the womb, possibly making birth a bit more challenging or a bit easier? To answer some of these really important questions, I am so happy to be welcoming one of the world authorities on pregnancy and birth bodywork and shiatsu, Suzanne Yates. So Suzanne Yates is an inspirational bodyworker and birth educator, and she's been developing a holistic approach to maternity care for almost 25 years now. She was motivated by her first pregnancy, and she began to deepen her professional interest in shiatsu and massage work to specialize in maternity care. She established the organization Well Mother in 1990, and you can still access a huge resource of information there about pregnancy and everything we talk about in this interview. So since then, she's taught shiatsu and massage and exercises to women and their partners and health professionals. She's written 3 amazing books: Shiatsu for Midwives, Beautiful Birth, which is an incredible resource for parents that I really encourage you to have a look at, and Pregnancy and Childbirth, which is a holistic approach to massage and bodywork. She teaches and speaks internationally. So I'm so happy to be introducing Suzanne to you today. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
What might mothers be unaware of when it comes to posture and pregnancy?
I think the most important thing is that we don't realise how much we are sitting. I mean, even I, as a shiatsu practitioner, I would say I don't sit a huge amount compared with a lot of people, but I'm still sat a lot. And traditionally, women would not be sitting as much as they are. So things like sitting at a desk, which we just consider as normal, or even just sitting at the table to eat, our meals, everything. We spend a lot of time sitting, but also sitting in cars as well, so travelling. So we're not moving as much as we used to be. And I think every year it kind of gets worse in a way because women are more driving children to school. Like even when I was a child, I'd walk to school. My mum would walk me, or I'd actually walk on my own. So that's the most important thing. And then at least with mobile phones, people haven't got phones just, they're scrunching up their shoulder and they've got a phone. So, but generally sitting at a desk, then people are very hunched over. So that basically creates 2 main issues. Because of the sitting, there's a lot of what we could say pressure and lack of a combination of pressure in the pelvic area, so like where the baby is growing, and because we're not moving, we're compressing it, so that's going to affect just being uncomfortable in the lower back, and also blocking the circulation of blood in our legs and fluids in our legs. So that a lot of, how could we put it, a lot of both tension builds up because of that, because especially as the baby gets bigger, pressure from the baby, but also lack of movement, which means that fluids like blood and also our lymph, which is what causes puffy ankles and things ultimately, but also muscles get weaker. So especially like abdominal muscles get weaker. So I don't know how much in New Zealand you have the diagnosis of pelvic girdle instability. Do you have that a lot?
I have heard that, yes.
Yeah. So pelvic girdle instability is a lot to do with that, because the muscles as well are not working as much because we're not sitting or moving. So we're not engaging the core. I mean, that's a kind of phrase that people are quite familiar with. And so you're getting a lack of movement in the pelvis, which means also weakness in the muscles. But then you're getting too much tension building up in the upper body by working at a keyboard, using a mobile phone. So there's like too much going on here. So these muscles get tight and the muscles in the pelvis get weak. And so that's the main thing that I would say.
And how might that manifest for a pregnant woman in terms of discomfort in different places? What sort of symptoms would she experience then? You've mentioned the tightness in the shoulders, so she might feel pain there, but what else might she be feeling?
Yeah, so in the shoulders, like could even be headaches because everything's very compressed. But it could also be because the shoulders are rounded, then of course, as we know, the chest, the breasts get bigger in pregnancy. So then she could be actually compressing the diaphragm and then when eating, things like heartburn, a lot of that's caused by poor posture. So sitting and eating, being a bit compressed, that's going to then compress the digestive system, the digestive tract, so heartburn. Breathlessness, if you're kind of compressed over here, then harder to breathe more easily, and also just a general feeling of tiredness. So that's from the upper body. And then, and the other thing is the fluids, because we talked about fluids in the pelvis. Not moving the arms, that's a big thing as well. Because again, in traditional cultures, people would spend quite a lot of time without moving their arms up and down, wouldn't they? Like picking something off a tree, or even things like cleaning windows that people don't do as much these days, or just more putting your arms above your head. And that's kind of stimulating the lymph nodes in the arms, and it's also helping drain fluids. So again, and as well as exercising muscles. So again, not lifting arms up and not opening up the chest, as we don't really do that in day-to-day activity unless we have more of a manual job. So that's the upper body. And then for the lower body, it's just things like backache, mostly are the issues. But also, as I said, more likelihood of things like varicose veins and also puffy ankles, like fluid retention. But things like also restless legs. You heard of restless legs, like just sitting a lot, then obviously the blood isn't circulating, fluids aren't circulating. Again, muscles are getting weaker, they might be contracting as well. So it's just general lack of movement in the legs will contribute to things like varicose veins and puffy ankles and just discomfort in the legs as well.
Right. So Suzanne, what can someone do? You say that we're very limited in our movement now compared to how things were even like 50 years ago. So what can
even 10 or 15 years ago.
Right. So we're becoming more and more sitting in front of our screens doing our whatever we're doing. What can we do then to improve our posture when we're awake, at home, at work, when we're resting? Can you give some examples of how we can really start to change this?
Yeah, because I think it's really good that something like pregnancy yoga, for example, has become a lot more widespread, because women do need to do it, the movements that they're not doing. But if they're just doing a weekly class, that's not really enough, because it's like you've said, it's about integrating things into day-to-day life. So just really simple things like not sitting for too long. I often say to people I work with, set an egg timer or something, or set your mobile phone to ring every 40 minutes or so to remind you to do something. So you could be sitting at your desk but just stretching your arms up, or you could actually literally just get up and move your pelvis. Because again, so getting out of your, moving your pelvis is also good, like every hour, because you do need to be doing something regularly. It's not enough to just do a 1 hour class a week. So moving the pelvis, doing hip circles, moving the chest, stretching the arms. But a good thing as well is being aware of the basic posture of pregnancy, which is where women, because of the weight of the baby, get pulled forward a lot. So if you imagine you're being pulled forward, that's tending to hollow your lower back. So that compresses the lower back vertebrae, and it lengthens the abdominal muscles, which are being stretched anyway by the baby. So you need to get people to basically draw the abdominal muscles in and lengthen the lower back. So again, standing up and doing that kind of movement is good, as well as lots of pelvic circling. But one other really simple thing that people can do is you can get little disc cushions that are made of plastic that you can put on your chair, that it make it like sitting on a ball, so that when you're sat, you're not compressing everything in the same way as if you're actually sat on a chair. So that fact you're doing very subtle movements all the time, making the muscles work, but you're also not compressing the pelvis and therefore the fluids in the same kind of way. Because a lot of people might think of sitting on a ball, but a lot of workplaces don't necessarily like people to sit on a ball because of it, it could go rolling off somewhere when they stand up. But that is another alternative. So at home, rather than sitting on a chair, try and sit on a ball. Because you're going to have to sit at some point. And obviously one thing is to try and sit as little as possible and get up and down and move around. But when you're sitting, try and sit on a ball, or at least on one of those cushions, so you're not compressing in the same kind of way. And then the other thing is, when you're not at work, try and move around as much as you can. So all the kind of simple things like walk instead of getting the bus, or walking up and down stairs rather than going in a lift, elevator, something like that. But also when you're at home or even at work, it depends on your office, maybe stand a bit. So for certain things you could stand. I mean, I don't know how popular in New Zealand, but it's becoming a bit popular to have like standing desks. So rather than sitting to do your work, you're standing up. So already that's quite good. But obviously you need to make sure you're standing correctly, so you're not hollowing your lower back. So that's quite an important thing.
That's a really good point, is how do you know if you're standing correctly? Can you explain that?
You can imagine if you're heavily pregnant, you've got the weight of the baby that tends to pull you forward. And so then people typically tend to hollow their lower back. So imagine the pelvis like a basin. So the baby kind of pulls everything forward, and people go with that, and that means they're hollowing their lower back. So a lot of the things I get people to do are visualising their pelvis like a basin, tilting it back a little bit so they feel their abdominal muscles engaging a bit. But it's also really good to think of the bottom of the bucket, and that's the pelvic floor muscles. So often I get people to do it with an out breath. So they breathe out, they draw up the pelvic floor muscles, so they're engaging them, so they tighten a little bit, and they feel the abdominal muscles tightening. And if they get that correct, they should already start to feel a lengthening of the whole spine. So then another image, that once they've got this correct tilt of the bucket or the pelvis, is to then visualise the whole spine from the head to the pelvis, and then try and imagine like a silver thread, we often say in Chinese medicine, that's attached to your tailbone that gently pulls it down to the floor. So you're kind of anchoring your lower back to the floor through your tailbone, and then a thread on the top of your head that lifts you to the sky, and then you're getting a lengthening through the whole spine. And if you try and do that, if you lengthen your whole spine, then you feel straight away that actually that opens the chest, it relaxes the shoulders, in fact, without having to do anything for the shoulders. And then that actually helps you breathe better. It helps all the digestive system have a bit more space. All your internal organs are less compressed. So they're the two key images: the bucket that's tilted correctly, the spine that is being pulled in opposite directions, bottom to the floor, top part to the ceiling or the sky. And the only other thing to be aware of, especially if you've got more than one child, is that you're not standing too much on your left or your right, because a lot of people, again, typically use one side, especially with another baby, exactly, holding a child on one side, and then they're not standing evenly between the left and the right side. So that's the other thing. So there's those three things: pelvis, spine, and weight evenly between the left and the right side.
That's so helpful, Suzanne. I know, just even talking about posture, I feel myself, I'm sitting down, but I feel myself sitting up straighter.
Oh, right, that's good. And breathing, then you start to breathe better, don't you?
Yeah, right, which is going to help the whole organism to feel more energised and alert. And
sitting, when you're awake, also leaning forwards on the ball, so that will take the weight off your lower back. So it's kind of like getting on your knees and then leaning over a ball or over a chair or over cushions.
Yes, right.
So that's a little bit more difficult to describe, because sometimes you might need to put cushions between your legs. Because if you sat down with your knees bent, then it might be a bit uncomfortable for your thighs. So you can always put lots of different cushions, and then you just lean. So it's kind of like a supported kneeling position.
So if you didn't have a ball, could you lean onto a couch with cushions on it?
Yeah. And the other thing is to if you're feeling tired, I mean, first of all, it's actually quite good to practice relaxing on a ball. And some people even find it so comfortable they actually go to sleep, or maybe not sleep for hours, but they find themselves dozing off a bit over the ball because it's so comfortable. But the other thing is lying on your left side and on your right side, because some people have this myth that they should only lie on one side. But to be honest, there are so many factors influencing which side is comfortable, and different sides are comfortable for different reasons. So my advice is do what feels right for you, but try to spend time on both sides. Don't just lie on one side. So finding side lying positions, but try where possible to avoid lying on your back. Even if you're in a like a soft chair like a sofa, don't lean backwards, because that's going to put more pressure on your lower back. And I know you want to talk about positioning of the baby, so I'll talk about that in a bit. But leaning backwards, you're just putting more weight on your pelvis. You're not addressing the issues of compression of the pelvis. So if you're on your side, you don't have the same compression for the pelvis.
Right.
So when you're asleep, again, you want to be really more lying on one side and then the other side. So again, I suggest people, especially as pregnancy progresses, they might want to have a cushion for their leg, the upper leg. So you imagine you're lying on your side, then you have your leg, your upper leg, you want it raised a bit, because otherwise it starts compressing your baby. So that's not so comfortable either. But to try and sleep on both sides. And just to say to people, if they do end up feeling more comfortable lying on their back, not to get scared of it, because they will wake up if they need to change position. So if they wake up and they're on their back and they're not feeling very comfortable, then it's quite a good idea to go on your left-hand side, because for some people, lying on the back can basically compress one of the main veins going to the heart. And the quickest way to release that is to lie on your left-hand side. But you'd be feeling a bit sweaty or dizzy, or you'd feel not very good. And then you just need to know, I need to lie on my left-hand side in that situation. But if you just wake up and you feel fine, then just choose whichever side is comfortable. So the other thing about in bed at night is it can be more easy in later pregnancy to turn by going through the all fours position. So some women might feel pain in the pubic bone, which is the bone at the front of the pelvis, and they feel a sort of grindy, sharp, uncomfortable feeling. Then they need to try and keep their knees more together. So that's when it's helpful to turn over through more the all fours position. Definitely if you have pain in your pubic bone, that's how you'd want to turn from one side to the other. But even if you don't have that pain, it can still be easier turning through all fours.
Well, Suzanne, you've made so many helpful suggestions. I think what I'm really taking from this is that there are so many things you can do during your whole day and then even at night to support yourself to, in a way, be more active. A lot of these things are really habit-changing ideas. And so for a little while there might be the need to set your phone or have little stickies around with reminders to actually support yourself in that way. So moving on from how your posture affects the pregnant mum's body, I wonder if you can talk about how posture can affect the position of baby and what a mum can do to support her baby to get into a good position.
Well, basically, the short answer is doing everything that's good for her will also be good for the baby. So the thing is that if she's getting compressed in her pelvis, then her baby's getting compressed in the pelvis, and the baby can't move to the same extent. And babies need to move when they're in the womb. That's how they grow and develop. They've got to be kicking and moving around and experiencing lots of different positions. And so it's really important for the baby that the mother's moving so that they get an opportunity to move around as well. So if the mother's just sitting there, poor little baby's not getting any stimulation either. So that's really quite important. And then a big thing as well is that what happens is the baby's back tends to kind of go, if the mother's more leaning back, then the baby's back, the baby also leans back. So the baby kind of does what the mother's doing. So then the baby tends to have their back going more against the mother's back. Okay. Yeah, this is the pelvis. So this is the kind of bucket thing that I was saying, that if you're tilting forwards, being pulled forward, then you get a rounding of the lower back. But if you lean forwards, I don't know how well this comes out actually.
It's great. It's perfect.
But here's the baby. So if the mum is sitting back. So this is, let me show you the spine. And then the mum goes back, so she's lying on her back.
Yeah.
Then the baby also tends to lie.
Yeah. Or with their head down, right? They might end up with their head
sorry,
down.
I should put the head down, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, head down. And then if the mum then goes the other way, so she's more leaning on all fours, then the baby also does. So the baby can rotate quite easily. Actually, it doesn't come out quite so well in Skype, but the baby can rotate in the pelvis quite easily, but it's going to go the same way that the mother's leaning. So if the mother's leaning forward, then the baby's back will come away from the spine.
Yeah, so their back will almost go like into the hammock of the mum's belly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then that's called the back-to-back position is obviously more uncomfortable for the mother, so that can be a cause of backache. The baby's back is getting compressed against the mother's back, but also it's likely to make her labour a bit more uncomfortable, and the baby is a bit more likely to get stuck if they're in that back-to-back position. But I never say to people, oh, it's really bad if your baby's back-to-back. It's more, you just want to encourage your baby to move. And so it's the same in labour as well. You still want to be using, in a way, it's quite simple. It's always the same positions are going to be helpful, because in labour, that being forwards will also give the baby a bit more space to move and find a good position for labour as well. So some of the myths that people have about only lying on their left side, it's like they're trying to fix the baby in a good position for birth, but you're not trying to fix the baby in a position. The baby still needs to move. It's more to remember to keep moving also during your birth, because that will help the baby move and find the best position. And that's a problem though, if people sit a lot, the baby's not got that same possibility for movement and is more likely to get a bit stuck in a more awkward position. And the same in labour itself, to not be lying down but still be on all fours, moving around, walking. It's all the same thing, and it's always going to be helpful for the baby as well as the mother. So it's a mutual thing. What's good for the mother is also good for the baby.
Great, that's so helpful, Suzanne. And I think what I'm hearing is that to just spend as little time as possible in really slouching type positions where the back is going backwards, that we actually have this more upright and forward position, and that we take time to really move and get into positions where our baby has that capacity to that their spine can swing down into the belly whenever it feels good for them. So
just rocking hips and moving and dancing and swaying, all of those kind of things will always be helpful, but not be with the idea we're trying to make the baby fix it in this position. It's just babies need to move, they enjoy moving, and trust that babies will find the right position if you give them the opportunity.
Fantastic, Suzanne. And if parents want to find more information about this, they can read your amazing book, Beautiful Birth.
Yes. Yeah. And I have a website as well called wellmother.org, and I have some information for parents on that. And I think I have some pictures. I think I have pictures of women on all fours on the ball, because it is a bit hard to visualise all of this if it's unfamiliar for people. But there's lots of pictures. I think I've got a couple of clips on YouTube of me demonstrating different movements and positions for women.
Brilliant.
I'm hoping to add some more over the next few months as well.
Thank you so much for your time.
Great, no, that's fine. Thank you for asking me. It's always useful and helpful to share information, I think.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. If you've been inspired, please share, make a comment, send this link to your friends, post on Facebook, and sign up for more birth wisdom that I share in emails at thebirthwhisperer.com, because your voice supports respectful, positive childbirth for all mothers and babies.